Welcome to my studio. I'm Lydia and I create sewing related content. I also create PDF sewing patterns that you can purchase on my website. Those are linked below for you. I find sewing very relaxing. I find it very rewarding, fun, and exciting. And I just want to share that with all of you. So today I thought I would share with you all of my tips on how to become an efficient sewer, how to sew faster, how to be able to sew 6 garments in 24 hours. Like I did in my previous video. That video was not a magic trick. There are tips and techniques that I use to sew efficiently. These are things that I've learned over the years through trial and error, and so I thought if I could share this with you, you could skip some of that trial and error and just apply these techniques and learn to become so much more efficient. A little bit about my background. I did go to fashion school, but before that my mom taught me how to sew. I was sewing quite advanced garments before I went to school because my mom is a very proficient sewer and she taught me well. This is actually one of my portfolio submissions. I show you that to exemplify that you do not need to go to fashion school to be able to sew complex things. You can go to YouTube University. There's so many people on YouTube that know what they're talking about. They've gone through fashion school, or they've gone through training of their own, or they've learned from trial and error and they're sharing things with you. When I first started sewing, I hated it when I was really young because I thought it was too slow, it was too intense. I just wanted to be able to cut out that fabric, sew it together, and have it perfectly fit me. But sewing is not always like that. You know the saying, you got to spend money to make money? Well, with sewing, sometimes you have to spend time to make time. And sometimes spending time will save you a ton of time later. And so I just want to share with you 10 tips of things that you can do right now to be more efficient, faster at sewing, more confident at sewing. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so my first tip is more towards beginner or advanced beginner sewers, and that is choose basic and hackable patterns. For example, something very basic would be a simple t-shirt. T-shirts are an amazing addition to have in your wardrobe. I find that they're kind of difficult to find at the price point, fabric content, fabric weight that I personally like in a store with the price point that I like. So I find t-shirts a really great thing to just make for myself. I can choose my fabric, I can choose the design of the pattern, I can choose how it fits me. So a t-shirt pattern is a great way to start. Since it's pretty basic, you can tweak the pattern to fit your unique body. And then once you get that pattern tweaked to how you like it, you can actually end up using that pattern in the future and hacking it. So when I'm talking about hacking a pattern, I mean altering it into a different style. With small adjustments, you could make a sweater, you could make a turtleneck, you could make a t-shirt dress of many different kinds. There are so many different kinds of t-shirt dresses that you could make with a simple t-shirt pattern. Because sewing fast and efficient really comes down to familiarity. The more familiar you are with that type of garment, the more quickly you'll be able to sew that garment. Okay, tip number 2. When you have a pattern, read through the specs of the pattern. In all of my patterns, I have a read first file which has all of the specs, the finished garment measurements, what kind of notions to get, what kind of fabric to get, how much fabric you need to get. These are all things that if you skip and you just wing it, you might end up with too little fabric, you might end up with the wrong notions, you might end up with the wrong fabric, and that will just make your project very difficult to do because you're using the wrong materials, or maybe you chose the wrong size. So definitely review all of that information with a pattern. You're going to save yourself time by taking the time to read through. Tip number... I am jumping in here to tell you about today's sponsor. That is Skillshare. If you haven't already heard of Skillshare, they are an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creators. You can explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and just get lost in creativity. There's things like illustration, video editing, graphic design, logo making, productivity. I took a productivity class and that was really helpful for me. Skillshare is curated just for learning, so there aren't any ads to interrupt as you learn. I found a class on Singing Made Easy. It's by GB Vocal Academy, and so I thought, hey, why not learn some things about it? I'm having fun with that, let me just say. If any of this sounds interesting to you, the first 1,000 to click the link below will get 1 month free membership of Skillshare, so you can try it out and see for yourself what I'm experiencing. Anyway, back to sewing tips and techniques to make you sew faster. Tip number 3. Do not start on low energy. Make sure that you sustain yourself, eat some food, drink some water, drink some coffee if you need it. Just get excited and revved up. Don't start a project on low energy because you're setting yourself up to fail. Before I did that video, sewing 6 garments in 24 hours, I made sure that I had a good sleep. I made sure that everything was ready for the project. I did mentally prepare myself for it. So when you're starting a project, prepare your body and your mind, okay? Number 4. Make sure that before cutting, before doing anything, you read and watch the instructions. I'd say like at least twice, but I think it would be best to do 3 times. Read those instructions, look through them, see if there's anything that you don't understand, that you have to Google, that you have to research. Maybe you don't know how to sew a dart, and there's maybe 4 darts in this garment. Google is your best friend with this. You can find anything that you're looking for. The more familiar you are with the instructions, with the sequence of sewing, the faster it will be for you. The less headache it will be, the less you have to stop and look at the instructions and be like, oh wait. The reason why I was able to sew all of those garments was because I was super familiar with them. Familiarization. Just memorize that word. Familiarizing yourself as much as possible is going to help you sew faster, sew more efficient. Tip number 5. Okay, this is very important. Estimate adequate and realistic timelines. Don't think to yourself, oh yeah, this coat's just gonna take me a day to cut and sew everything. Especially if you are not a full-time sewer like me, or you don't have large chunks of time that you can just dedicate to sewing. Break up your project into manageable little bites. One day, maybe read through all the instructions, read through the specs, purchase your fabric, get all your notions together. Next day, you cut and prep everything. Cutting and prepping can take a long time, so it's nice to just set aside one day or one portion of time for just that. That's what I did with my sewing 6 garments in 24 hours. I cut everything and prepped everything the day before. The next day that you take up your project again, maybe you're sewing up to a certain point. Maybe you're sewing all of the separate elements, and then the following day you assemble everything and do all the finishings. So just break up your project into little bite-sized times that are realistic for you, and psychologically you'll feel much better too. Number 6. Before you sew anything, before you use your beautiful fabric, create a toile. Get some fabric that's not expensive. I usually use muslin that you can buy for like $3 a yard. Then I'll cut out my dress from that and I'll just sew it up. And when you do a toile, you don't have to sew everything and finish it all perfectly. Like, you don't have to necessarily hem it or put all the facings inside or whatever. You can do those things if that's something you want to practice, but you basically just want the general shell shape of the garment to see how it fits you, to see if you need to make any adjustments. And that's all you have to do. You do that, you make the small adjustments to your pattern, and then you go ahead with your final garment in good fabric. Then you can feel confident that it's going to fit you, and you can even have some of those techniques under your belt because you already tested them. And usually the second time around doing a technique, it's better than the first time. So you get a little bit of practice in with a toile. I know it takes more time, but it can really save you time in the end and save you money, because if you end up wrecking your good fabric and sewing it wrong in a size that's too small or in a way that's just irredeemable, then it's kind of a bummer because you just wasted all that time and money. But if you just spend a little extra time doing that toile, it's gonna be golden. Number 7, this tip is to cut and prep everything before sewing. I mean everything. There were times, and there are still times, when I don't cut everything. I'm like, oh, I don't feel like cutting out the sleeve right now. And so I don't. Or I don't feel like adding the fusible interfacing right now. I'll add it later when I get to that part. It's more of a headache to do it that way, I find. If I have everything cut out, everything pre-pressed, like pressing up hems, for example, on a t-shirt, I like to press up the hem before so that when I'm sewing it from the top, it ends up an even 1-inch hem all the way around because I already ironed it and measured it. I really think that's why I was so successful in doing those 6 garments. Tip number 8. It's kind of an annoying step for me personally. I don't find it particularly fun. That is setting up your machines, getting the right thread, maybe getting an extra bobbin in the color of fabric that you're using so that you don't have to stop in the middle of your project and spend the time winding a whole bobbin. Change your needle to the right size. Maybe you're working on a heavier fabric last time. Just little things like that. Get it all ready so that you don't have to deal with fixing things. Tip number 9. When you actually start your project, do not procrastinate the challenging parts. If you can, do those parts first. So when I sewed all those garments in a day, I started with the most difficult garment and ended with the easiest garment. And it was really helpful because I had all that energy at the beginning. You saw the energy that I had. And I used it on my most challenging project, which was the shacket that has cuffs, it has plackets, it has patch pockets, it has a collar. These are all things that are a little bit more challenging, and I ended up doing those things first. So even if you're doing one project, if the order of operation allows, like your sewing instructions allows, try to do the more difficult components first when you have more steam, and then you'll feel yourself being uplifted as you realize, oh, I only have to hem that. Oh, I only have to sew up the side seam. I already did the hard parts. It really helps psychologically to get a garment done quicker. Also with that, if you're breaking up your project into different days, don't stop at a discouraging or challenging part if you can help it. Try to push through, try to troubleshoot, and end on a happy note. There have been times when I've stopped a project in the middle of a really annoying or challenging part, and because of that, I really wasn't in no hurry to complete that project because I was left with that feeling of discouragement. If you're at a challenging spot because it's beyond your capacity, then that's when you stop and that's when you do some research or you put aside that project for a future time. Okay, the final tip is to write down things that you learned, things that you found challenging, things that you can improve upon for that project. It's great to have a little sewing journal that kind of like where you put your sketches. Like this is my old journal. I have sketches of designs, and then I have like little notes on things. Sometimes even just the act of writing down these tips and techniques helps solidify it in your head. So I really hope all of this information was helpful. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe if you want to see more, and I would love to hear from you in the comments. Check out my patterns. I have video tutorials for each of them showing you each technique in detail, close up, showing every little step. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all become better, more efficient, more confident sewers, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!